The Torah tells us it's a mitzvah for the Kohen, the priest, to wear 4 special garments in the Holy Temple. And the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, wore 8 special garments. One of these garments was called the Tzitz. And that was a golden plate upon which it was written the 2 words, Kodesh LaHashem, sanctified unto God. And so to understand the concept of this special garment known as the Tzitz, on a level of Pshat, on a simple level, on Remiz and Hint and Drush, and Homiletics and Soid and Esoteric, and also to understand it on a level of Chassidus. On the level of Pshat, the simple interpretation, Rashi, the classic commentator of the Torah, tells us what is the reason why the Kohen had to wear this garment. All of the garments served as a special purpose. So Rashi tells us that the reason for this garment was l'ratzos al hadam v'al hachelev, that if there was blood or if there was fats that was offered on the altar, shekarvu betuma, that was brought on the altar impure, it was impure blood or impure fats. Therefore the tzitz, this special golden plate that the Kohen Gadol wore on his forehead, brought atonement to that mistake, brought atonement to that blood, and brought atonement to that fats that was brought even though it was impure. So that is the simple interpretation for why there was the special garment on the forehead of the Kohen. What is the remez? What is the hint? The hint is for the future. And that is, in the future, every Jew will be a Kohen Gadol. As it says, V'atem tiyu li mamleches kohanim v'gei kadosh, at Matan Torah. When God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, He called us a kingdom of priests. And as the commentaries explain, not only simple priests, but rather kohanim gedolim, high priests. And where is the place of a high priest? The high priest, we know, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, the holiest Jew, the high priest, went into the holiest place on earth, which was called the Kodesh HaKadosh, the Holy of Holies. And even though he only went once a year, but the Medrash tells us, B'zois Yavoy, if he prepares himself, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, can go anytime he wants to the Holy of Holies. For the place of a Kohen Gadol is the Holy of Holies. And in truth, when Mashiach will come, we will see that every Jew truly belongs in the Holy of Holies. And therefore, when we speak about these 8 garments, we are reminded of this time when every one of us will be a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, and go into the Holy of Holies. And this concept is underscored by the following story. There's a story told in Malachim Beis, in the book of the prophets, that there was a time when they wanted to kill out all the children of the Davidic dynasty, who would be the future kings of the Judeans or the people of Israel. And what happened was that Yosheva went and took Yoash, a little boy, a little baby, and took him together with his nursemaid, and she hid them. She hid them for 6 years. Where did she hide them? In the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. As it says that in the Holy of Holies, there was also an attic, so to speak. And that was another chamber that was a duplicate of the Holy of Holies. And in that higher chamber, which was the upper chamber of the Holy of Holies, that is where Yosheva hid Yoash for 6 years together with his nursemaid. And everything was given there, food and water and shelter, because this is the holiest place on earth, and therefore it was provided for by Almighty God Himself. And this is the promise, and this is the blessing, that when Mashiach will come, we will have everything we need physically and spiritually, and this will be provided for by God Himself. What is the drush? What is the homiletics? There's a machloikis, there's an argument how exactly they wrote these 2 words of Kodesh LaHashem. Did they write these two words, Kodesh LaHashem, on one line on the forehead, or was it two lines? So Rabbi Eliezer Bar Yossi says, I was in Rome, and I saw this golden plate, and it was written on one line, Kodesh LaHashem, holy unto God. Those were the words on the plate. The Chachamim, the rabbis, say no, it was two lines. On the bottom line it said Kodesh Lamid, holy two, and on the top line you had God's name. And interestingly, according to the Arizal, Rabbi Chaim Vital says he thinks his teacher said the following, that the Yud and the Vav of God's name was on the right side of the plate, and the two Hays of God's name was on the left side of the plate. Because the two Hays allude to the feminine mystique, and the Yud and the Vav allude to the masculine mystique. And therefore the four letters of God were divided that way. But the basic machlokes, the basic argument is whether it was on one line or two lines. And the question is asked, if Rabbi Eliezer says, I saw it with my own eyes, I'm an eyewitness, how can the rabbis come along and say, we have a tradition that it was two lines? There's nothing that you can compare to seeing. Seeing is believing. And the answer is that we know that there were many things that was made in the Holy Temple, yet it was not exactly duplicated properly or not presented properly. The first example is the Arch of Titus. If you look at the menorah on the Arch of Titus, the menorah is round. And there are also other articles on that menorah that the Torah doesn't speak about. Yet, in the commentary of Rashi, and in the commentary of the Rambam, Nachmanides, they both say that the menorah in the Holy Temple was not a round menorah, rather it was triangular, it was on an angle. Even though they knew about the Arch of Titus. Yet they clearly said that according to tradition and according to Torah, the actual menorah was not round, but rather triangular. And the same is true that even though Rabbi Eliezer saw that the menorah, or rather that this golden plate, had the name of Kodesh LaHashem on one line, says the rabbis that's not a proof that that is the way it was made in the Holy Temple. It's very possible that other people copied it, knowing that it was a holy artifact, and it was worn by the Kohen Gadol, by the high priest, and therefore they wanted to copy it. But that doesn't mean that that is the way the Kohen Gadol actually wore it. The Rebbe takes this concept one step further, and he says that today we find with archaeologists there are many artifacts that are being revealed. And there are those from the Dead Sea Scrolls, etc., etc. And these are religious articles that were hidden for many years and now are unfolded and now are revealed. And there are certain things that they are finding that is contrary to the Torah that we have today. Different sections that are omitted or different sections that are added, etc., etc., that we don't have in the actual Torah scroll, we don't have in the book of the prophets. So the question is, can we use this as a proof that perhaps they are correct and we are incorrect? Says the Rebbe, it's not a proof. Just like Rabbi Eliezer Bar Yossi said, I saw Kodesh LaHashem on one line, yet the rabbis came along and said, no, we have a tradition, it was on two lines. Surely if we have a Sefer Torah today that has been passed down from many generations, and every Sefer Torah throughout the entire world is practically written the same way, letter for letter, and now you're going to find another scroll that was hidden somewhere in a cave and has a different writing or a different paragraph or a different interpretation, that in no way undermines our tradition and our proof of the text. And surely if there's the absence of proof, there's no proof of absence. And this is the drush, this is the homiletics that we derive from the actual golden plate of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. What is the soid? What is the esoteric message of this plate. What is the meaning of the word tzitz? This was called the tzitz. What does the tzitz mean? It means to steer, to look, and to shine forth with light. And therefore Rabbeinu Bachaya tells us that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, wore 8 garments. 7 of the 8 represented the 7 heavens. The 8th heaven is represented by the tzitz, this golden plate that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, wore on his forehead. And in letters or oisius of Chassidus, which this means is that the 7 garments represent the 7 garments of the world of Bria, the world of creation. And the tzitz comes from a higher place, which is Malchus of Atzilus, which is the light that enters into these 7 heavens. The light that comes forth, which we know today as the Shekhinah. In other words, that this reminds us how God watches over the Jewish people. Meitzis min hacharakim, He's always looking and peeking through the cracks. He's always watching over us, even when we don't see Him. Even when the Jews are in Golus and exile, and we think perhaps God is dormant, we have to know that Tzitz reminds us that God is always watching and steering and peeking and looking for the good and the protection of the Jewish people. This is the concept of the Tzitz, the Soid, the esoteric level. What does Chassidus say? Chassidus focuses on the fact that all of these 8 garments were l'chavod u'l'sefaris, which means were for honor and for beauty. And that means as follows: when a Jew does a mitzvah, when a Jew does God's commandment, he has to do it the way that a Kohen does the commandment. And not only like a Kohen does the commandment, but also a Kohen Gadol. And therefore it's important to first mention the teachings of the Chinuch. The Chinuch says that one's actions leads to intentions. That even though you're not in the mood, for example, if you're going to smile, eventually you'll become happy. And therefore, he says, by putting on garments, priestly garments, holy garments, this puts a person in a frame of mind that he's in a very special place. If you go to a wedding and you get dressed up, but you're not in the mood of the wedding, but once you already put on the tuxedo, you put on the fancy gown, and you come to the wedding, you already feel, majestic, you feel happy. And the same is true with the Kohen and the Kohen Gadol in the Holy Temple. By wearing these garments, says Rabbeinu Bachaya, it's like putting on tefillin. By putting on tefillin, you look on the box on the arm, and you look on the box on your head. You're reminded that you're standing before God. You're reminded that God commanded you to change the world. This inspires you to do this. And that was the idea, similarly, of the Kohanic garments. L'chavod u'l'sefaris. By putting on these garments, it put the Kohen into the proper mood. Chassidus takes it a step further and says, in truth, this is for everything in Judaism. That everything in Judaism has to be done l'chavod, for God's honor, u'l'sefaris, and with beauty. And that is not simply to do a mitzvah in the minimum, but rather to do the mitzvah in the maximum. When it comes to Kiddush Friday night, not to use the cheapest wine for Kiddush, but to use an expensive wine for Kiddush. And when you have a Shabbos table, not to put down, simple paper plates, or to use, tuna or things like that, but to have good fish, and to have a beautiful china, and to have beautiful crystal on the table, because this shows the beauty of Shabbos. I heard once from a rabbi that a fellow told him that one of his children who were not so religious, he was drifting away a bit from the path. And he wrote to the Rebbe what to do. So the Rebbe said, you should make a more beautiful Shabbos table. That was the response. In other words, in my humble estimation, the Rebbe was trying to tell him, show your child the beauty of Yiddishkeit. Unfortunately, most of us know about Judaism in a world of oppression. There was a Holocaust and a Spanish Inquisition and communism. Everything was difficult. Because they were Jewish, things were hard. Comes along Torah and says that's not the objective of Judaism. On the contrary, l'chavod u'l'sefaris, it has to be beautiful. And we have the opportunity to show the world by starting to show ourselves that everything we do, every mitzvah that we do should be done with splendor and with greatness. And therefore, a shul should be adorned beautifully, and you have to buy beautiful tefillin, not the cheapest tefillin, but a nicer pair of tefillin, etc., etc. And this is the idea of the Chabad L'Sofar, that every single day we can be a Kohen, as the Rambam tells us, that even though normally a Kohen means someone who was born to the tribe of Levi, but it's not so. Today, every single man, woman, or child who dedicates themselves to God's service, to make the world a better place, to inspire our brothers and sisters and bring them closer to God, that person is a Kohen. And not only a Kohen, but a Kohen Gadol, a high priest who goes into the Holy of Holies. And therefore the mitzvah of making these garments are truly relevant today. And each one of us has this mitzvah to truly make his life and his mitzvah more beautiful and more honorable before God. A story is told that the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, had a daughter by the name of Freda. Freda was a very beautiful, but a brilliant woman. And because she was so brilliant and so smart, the Alter Rebbe would teach his daughter a Maimer, a Hasidic discourse, one-on-one, just for the daughter. The Alter Rebbe had a son by the name of Berel, who became the next Rebbe. And this young Berel wanted very much to hear the teachings that his father taught Freda. So he asked his older sister, can I come and hide under the bed in the bedroom when the Alter Rebbe will come and teach you this Hasidic discourse? First she hesitated, but after his persistence, she said, fine, just hide under the bed quietly. The Alter Rebbe came in and began to discuss the 8 different garments that the Kohen Gadol wore, al pi Chassidus, based on Hasidic thought. And he went and he explained all 7, but the Alter Rebbe omitted one of them. He did not explain the 8th, which was the gartel, and that was the belt or the sash that the Kohen wore. So little Berel takes his own gartel that he wore, and he sticks it out from under the bed to show his sister. Tell Tati, get Daddy, you talk about the gartel as well. So Freda says, Tati, Dad, you only mentioned 7, you didn't mention the 8th one. The Alter Rebbe realized that question was not coming from her. And he says, okay, this must be the works of Berel. Berel, get out from your hiding place. And that was the end of the story. So this is the concept of the garments that God gives each and every one of us. And that is the potential to truly beautify and to truly bring honor to His name. And we hope and pray to see very soon the rebuilding of the third Holy Temple. But once again, the Kohen Gadol will go into the Holy of Holies with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.